The courthouse, a grand and imposing structure, looms over the city like a silent judge. Its polished marble floors gleam under the high ceilings, casting long, cold shadows. The walls, adorned with the portraits of revered judges and lawmakers, stand as silent witnesses to centuries of power and privilege. The courthouse represents the pinnacle of justice, but in this city, it serves as a reminder of the systemic inequalities that persist just outside its walls. Ava Carter walks through its corridors, her footsteps echoing in the hollow space. She wears her confidence like armor, but beneath the surface there is a quiet weight pressing against her chest. Every day she steps into this place, she's reminded of the wall she must scale, the invisible barriers that rise every time she speaks, every time she's looked past, every time her voice is dismissed. "Ms. Carter, can you please address the court?" The judge's voice is sharp, pulling her from her thoughts. She nods and steps forward, her presence commanding the room, but she knows that to some she is still an anomaly here. She's a black woman in her early 30s, navigating a world where her accomplishments are constantly questioned and her talents go unnoticed. Ava Carter is brilliant, but brilliance alone has never been enough. The world she's fighting to be a part of wasn't built for people like her. As she stands before the judge, her mind briefly flashes back to the countless times she's had to prove herself in this space. Her voice, steady yet forceful, fills the room. "Your Honor, we're here today because..." Her words are interrupted by a dismissive murmur from one of her white male colleagues, his casual arrogance cutting through her statement like a blade. She presses on, but the sting of those moments, the times her ideas are stolen, her thoughts dismissed until someone else speaks them, linger. They all do. It's like an unspoken rule. In this field, you have to work harder, be smarter, be better just to be seen as equal. The case before the court is straightforward, but it's not just about the facts for Ava. It's about proving that she belongs, that despite everything the world says, despite all the ways she's been passed over, she can rise above it all. But even as she stands tall, she feels the weight of every rejection she's endured in this space, the promotions she never received, the meetings where her ideas were ignored, only to be celebrated when presented by someone else. These invisible barriers that no one talks about have begun to wear on her, the endless need to fight for recognition, for space, for the chance to be seen. But she's learned to fight back with grace and composure, even when her thoughts scream to break free. "Your Honor," she says again, louder this time, her voice unwavering. "The law is clear and this case must be handled with impartiality. The facts do not lie." She watches as the judge nods, indifferently, as if acknowledging her, but not seeing her. In the silence that follows, Ava feels the walls closing in. She's been here before. The room is not unfamiliar, but the weight of every glance that doesn't quite meet hers is a constant reminder. She is not like them, even when she outperforms, even when her mind exceeds expectations. There's always that part of her that knows her success will never come without a fight. She'll have to prove herself again and again, every single time. The doubt is always there, lingering like a shadow. Ava takes a deep breath and steps back from the judge's bench, her posture stiffening. This is the reality she faces daily. No matter how much she excels, she is always fighting against perceptions, against systems built to silence her and others like her. But there is something deeper inside her, something unbreakable. Her mother's words echo in her mind. "You are worthy, no matter what the world tells you." She stands up straight, fighting the wave of exhaustion that tries to overwhelm her. "I will be seen," she whispers under her breath. Not by the judge, not by those who don't acknowledge her, but by herself. Because she knows that no matter how hard the road ahead will be, she cannot give up. Not now, not ever. As she walks out of the courtroom later that day, she feels it again. The quiet yet constant sting of discrimination. It's not just the overt actions, the blatant rejections, but the subtle things. The way the world around her constantly reinforces the idea that someone like her doesn't belong in places like this. It's in the way people forget her name, or the way her ideas get picked apart until a colleague says the same thing, and suddenly it's brilliant. She stops in her tracks as she passes a mirror on the hallway wall, looking at her reflection for a long moment. Ava Carter, black, female, and brilliant. The fight that has gotten her this far doesn't end here. It can't. She knows that every success, every victory she wins isn't just for her. It's for every other person who's had to fight for the same recognition. For every person who's ever been told they don't belong, or they're not good enough, or that their dreams are impossible. I belong here, she says to her reflection, her voice steady. I belong here, and I will fight for what is mine. I will fight for justice. And as she walks out into the quiet streets, Ava knows this fight has only just begun. She is no longer just a lawyer in a courtroom. She is a woman determined to, shatter the walls built by prejudice and systemic racism. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the air thick with an unspoken judgment that seemed to weigh down on everyone present. Ava stood at the podium, her fingers gripping the edge of the lectern, her heart pounding in her chest. She was here to fight for justice, to stand up against the systemic inequalities she had faced her entire life. But as she turned to face Judge Alan Matthews, she felt an unsettling chill. Judge Matthews, an older man with a reputation for upholding the status quo, sat in his chair with a cold, disinterested expression. His hands were clasped in front of him, as if ready to dismiss whatever came next. Ava had heard the rumors, the stories of his dismissive attitude toward black lawyers. Today, she would experience it firsthand. Ms. Carter, Matthews said, his voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate further on your argument, though I suspect we've heard enough already. Ava's stomach tightened, but she held her ground. Your Honor, she began, the facts of this case speak for themselves. My client is entitled to a fair hearing, and it's imperative that we proceed based on the merits of the case, not assumptions based on... She was cut off by Matthews's sharp interruption. Let's not get too carried away, Ms. Carter. You're new to this, aren't you? I would think we should focus on the basics before getting lost in the details. The dismissive tone, the patronizing words, they weren't new to Ava. She had faced them countless times before. But today, in this moment, they cut deeper than ever. It wasn't just her argument Matthews was undermining. It was her presence, her right to be there simply because of who she was. Ava swallowed hard, fighting the rising tide of frustration. She continued, her voice steady but laced with the intensity of years of pent-up anger. Your Honor, my client deserves justice, as does everyone else in this courtroom, regardless of the color of their skin. Matthews sneered, the arrogance in his smile almost too much to bear. Let's not get emotional, Ms. Carter. We deal in facts here, not your... But Ava couldn't hold back anymore. Her words rushed out, a sharp rebuke that she'd held back for far too long. You don't get it, do you, Judge? This isn't just about facts, it's about a system that's rigged against people like me. It's about the fact that no matter how much I achieve, no matter how qualified I am, I will always have to prove myself over and over again. The courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence, all eyes now on her. Ava's breath was shallow, her hands trembling slightly, but she stood her ground. For the first time, she felt the weight of every injustice, every moment of dismissal, every time her voice had been ignored. It was all here, in this one moment. Judge Matthews' eyes narrowed, and he raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough, Ms. Carter. If you can't remain professional, I will have to adjourn. Ava bit back the retort that threatened to escape her lips. Instead, she nodded, stepping back, her shoulders stiff with both anger and resolve. She had to play the game, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the system was never going to let her win on their terms. She would have to change the rules. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her office, the weight of the day pressed down on her. The rejection, the condescension, the subtle and not so subtle reminders of her place. It all felt like too much. For a moment, Ava let the exhaustion wash over her. She closed her eyes, leaning back in her chair. Was she really cut out for this fight? Was there even a point in trying to push against a system so deeply entrenched in its biases? But then, as if a light flickered on, she thought of her father. His words came back to her, steady and strong, like they had when she was a child. Don't let them tell you who you are. They will try to box you in, but you are bigger than their labels. Fight for the justice they won't give you. Fight for the generations who'll come after you. Her father had been an activist, someone who'd spent his life fighting for a world where people of color were treated as equals. His battles were far from over when he passed away, but his lessons had stayed with her, fueling her determination. Even on the hardest days, she opened her eyes, wiping away the tear that had escaped without her permission. "I'm not giving up," she whispered to herself, her voice raw. "Not now, not ever." The frustration that had once threatened to defeat her began to shift, morphing into a quiet resolve. She couldn't just fight to be seen. She needed to fight. To change the system that kept her and so many others from succeeding on equal terms. If Matthews, and men like him, were going to dismiss her, she would make them take her seriously, not just once, but over and over again. In the days that followed, Ava threw herself into her work with newfound vigor. She knew the case was important, but she also knew that her battle wasn't just about one case. It was about the entire legal system, one that had been built to favor the powerful and oppress the marginalized. Ava began researching legal precedents that could challenge Matthews' biased decisions. She contacted allies, consulted with mentors, and began to map out her strategy. This case wasn't just her fight. It was a fight for every person of color who had ever been dismissed, belittled, or excluded from spaces they had every right to occupy. She wasn't going to let Matthews or anyone else define her. Ava had already proven that she was capable. Now it was time to prove that the system itself needed to change. She was ready to take on not just him, but the entire system of oppression. The tension in the courtroom that day was palpable, but Ava was ready. She had come to take control, to hold the system accountable for its actions. As she stood before Judge Matthews once more, she no longer felt the fear or doubt that had crept into her heart earlier. She was not just a lawyer, she was a force, and she would not be silenced. With a steady breath, Ava began her argument. Every word, every sentence was calculated to expose the bias Matthews had so blatantly displayed. She pointed out his history of dismissing people of color, showing how his actions had undermined the principles of justice. As she spoke, she could feel the eyes of the courtroom on her. For the first time, the power was shifting. Judge Matthews, now visibly uncomfortable, tried to interrupt, but Ava wouldn't allow it. She pressed on, her voice unwavering. The moment was electric. Ava knew this fight was bigger than just her. It was about everything she had worked for, everything her father had fought for, and everything that future generations of black lawyers would need to overcome. She would make sure that the system would never be the same again. And as the trial came to a close, Ava Carter stood tall, knowing that this was just the beginning. She had found her voice, and she would use it to dismantle the walls that had kept her and so many others out. The room for far too long. Ava steps forward in the courtroom, the eyes of everyone locked on her. The tension is palpable. She knows that the moment of truth has arrived, the culmination of her years of struggle, the pressure of a system designed to suppress her. This isn't just about this case anymore. It's about the fight for justice, for every marginalized voice that's been silenced. Her voice shakes slightly, but carries the weight of every injustice she's ever faced. As she speaks, she doesn't just address the case at hand, but directly challenges Judge Matthews's deep-seated biases. "Your Honor," she says, the words crisp and sharp, "this case isn't just about my client. It's about the entire system you represent. A system that judges people based on their race, not the merits of their case." The room grows silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Judge Matthews scoffs, his hand rising dismissively. "Ms. Carter, you're overstepping. Stick to the facts, please." But Ava's resolve is unwavering. "The facts are that I've been dismissed, overlooked, belittled. Not because I'm not qualified, but because I don't look like you. Her gaze never leaves Matthews. The courtroom, once divided, now holds its collective breath. Ava's words hang in the air like a challenge. She's not just speaking for herself anymore. She's speaking for everyone who has ever been denied a seat at the table simply because of the color of their skin. Tipping the scales, Ava's public victory. The courtroom erupts into a hum of whispers, but Ava's stance doesn't waver. She knows the stakes. Matthews, ever the gatekeeper of privilege, tries to dismiss her again, but his words come off as weak in comparison to her powerful rebuttal. Ava's resolve has turned the tables, shifting the focus from the case to Matthews himself. Outside the courtroom, the media begins to take notice. News outlets run with the story of a black woman, challenging a powerful, biased judge in a legal system that has long excluded people like her. Social media explodes with support. People begin to rally behind her, recognizing Ava as not just a lawyer, but a symbol of the fight for equality. Matthews, whose reputation was once untouchable, starts to feel the weight of public scrutiny. His own actions, once hidden behind the gavel, are now exposed. Ava's courage has ignited a fire that spreads, calling into question the very systems that have protected individuals like Matthews for so long. Ava stands firm, watching the shift occur. "I'm not just challenging this case," she says to the press later. "I'm challenging the entire system that has allowed people like Matthews to thrive, unchecked, while others are left to fight for scraps." Her words are a rallying cry for those who have been kept out, shut out, and told they don't belong. Ava's victory is not just personal. It's a statement to the world that the time for change has come. A moment of transformation. Ava takes her seat. The gavel falls. The case is over, and Ava has won. The victory is more than legal. It's a testament to the strength of her resolve, to the battles fought in every corner of her life. She's done it. She's proven that resilience can break the systems that try to hold you down. As she walks into the courtroom, it's no longer as a woman fighting for recognition. She's walking in as a force of change. The room feels different. There's a new energy in the air, a sense of possibility that wasn't there before. As Ava steps to the front, her gaze meets that of Judge Matthews. He's no longer the one in control. He's sidelined, not by the system, but by the truth that Ava has fought so hard to bring to light. When Ava takes her seat at the table, the room falls silent. It's a moment of transformation, not just for her, but for everyone watching. She's not just a lawyer anymore. She's a symbol of what's possible when you refuse to let prejudice define you. Ava has done what no one thought was possible. She's become the change she had always dreamed of. As she sits, poised and confident, she looks around the courtroom. The old systems may still stand, but today, Ava Carter has shown that one person, one voice can reshape the world. Her fight is far from over, but today, she knows that the walls that once seemed unshakable can and will come down. Ava's legacy. A beacon of hope for the future. Ava's story doesn't end in the courtroom. It begins there. The victory over Matthews is just the start of a larger movement. She begins to mentor young black lawyers, showing them that they, too, have the power to challenge the systems that have held them back. The legal field, once a battleground for her, is now a place where she's actively creating space for others like her to succeed. In her speeches, Ava emphasizes the importance of standing up against systemic racism, and her words resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. "We fight not just for the cases we win, but for the generations that will come after us," she says, standing before a new wave of activists and lawyers. The work is not done, but it has already begun. Her fight for justice continues, now with the strength of an entire movement behind her. Every case she wins, every person she mentors, is another brick in the foundation of a more just world. Ava's legacy is not just about one courtroom victory. It's about the change she's inspired in everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. As she walks out of the courtroom, a quiet smile forms on her face. The fight for equality is far from over. But with every step Ava takes, she proves that the impossible is within reach. Ava sat in her office, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. The victory she had won in the courtroom was monumental, but it wasn't just for her. It was for every person of color who had been forced to work harder, prove more, just to be seen as equal. Her work was just beginning. "I didn't do this alone," she murmured to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. The faces of those who had helped her along the way flashed in her mind. Her family, her mentors, her friends. They had all supported her, had all believed in her when she felt too small to believe in herself. She couldn't forget the struggle, couldn't forget how hard it had been to get to this point. But now, she had the power to make a change. She knew that the next step would not be easy. She was committed to fighting for systemic change in the legal system. But there was so much more to do. She had the voice now. She had the platform. "I'll use it," she said aloud, the resolve clear in her voice. She had made a vow to herself after that case, after the crushing prejudice she'd fought so hard against. She would not let this victory be a moment of personal triumph. She would channel it into something bigger, something that would ripple out far beyond her career. She would use her position to advocate for fairness, for equality, for the people who had been pushed aside and left behind by the very system she had dedicated her life to changing. As she began drafting plans for mentorship programs, her mind turned to the next battle: judicial reform. Ava had faced the very real, very harmful biases of the legal system head-on. The time had come to start dismantling them. Her first step was to call for reforms within the justice system that would challenge the deep biases ingrained in its practices. Ava knew that change could not come from just one case or one victory. She had to push for change across the board. Ava's phone rang, breaking her train of thought. It was a fellow lawyer, Malcolm, who had long been an ally in her fight. "You've heard about the press conference, right?" Malcolm asked, his voice laced with a hint of excitement. Ava smiled, even though she wasn't sure she was ready for this conversation yet. "Not yet, but I can guess. The fight's just beginning, isn't it?" "Exactly," Malcolm said. "You've been the face of the fight against bias in the courtroom, but now it's time to take this further. We need to start talking about broader changes, changes to how the system itself is built, how it's structured." Ava leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "I know, but it's so much. It's overwhelming. It's supposed to be, but you're the one leading the charge now. We're all with you." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air. Ava wasn't alone anymore, but the fight ahead would take everything she had. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and planning. Ava worked tirelessly, putting together a strategy for dismantling the barriers in place within the legal system. She knew the challenges she faced would be immense, but now she wasn't backing down. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a voice for change, and she had the platform to push that change forward. Ava stood before a crowded auditorium at a major legal conference. The audience was a sea of faces: lawyers, activists, academics, some with hope in their eyes, others skeptical. Ava knew that her words today would have to push them, challenge them, make them see what needed to be done. "I didn't fight this battle just for myself," Ava began, her voice unwavering. "I fought for every person who has been told they weren't good enough, who has been overlooked, who has been pushed aside because of the color of their skin. This fight is for them." Her words were met with applause, but it was just the beginning. Ava continued, her eyes shining with resolve. "But we can't stop here. The fight for justice isn't just about breaking down individual barriers. It's about taking down the whole system. Systemic racism that continues to live and breathe in every corner of our courts, in every decision, in every ruling." The room was silent now. Ava had their attention. "We need reform," she said. "Not just policy changes, not just temporary fixes. We need a system that values fairness, equity, and justice for all people. We need to take down the walls that have been built to keep people of color out of power, out of influence. And that begins today." In the weeks that followed, Ava's words reverberated across the country. She had become a leader in the movement for judicial reform, pushing for systemic changes that would ensure racial equity in the legal system. Her calls for reform gained momentum, but it was still just the beginning. Ava knew the path ahead would be long and difficult, but she was committed. She made it clear in every speech, every interview, that the fight was not over. It was just beginning. Ava's reflection on the legacy she was building became the foundation for her work. She knew she had set something in motion, something larger than herself. Her story had become a symbol of what could happen when someone refused to be silenced, when someone refused to accept injustice as the status quo. She didn't just want to be remembered for winning cases or achieving success. She wanted to be remembered for creating the space that others could step into, space that had been denied to them for far too long. The fight for racial justice didn't end with her success. It was only just starting. Standing at the front of a new courtroom, one filled with young lawyers who would take the lead in the future, Ava felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was no longer fighting alone. She was part of a larger movement, a movement that would continue long after she was gone. "This isn't just about me," Ava said to the room. "It's about all of us. It's about breaking the chains that have bound us for too long. It's about creating a future where no one is left behind." Her words carried the weight of everything she had fought for. Ava had become more than a lawyer. She had become a symbol of hope, a beacon for others to follow. The future was in their hands, and Ava was ready to lead them into it. The work would continue. The barriers weren't all gone, but Ava had shown the world that change was possible. And as she looked out over the diverse group of future leaders, she knew that the seeds of justice she had planted would grow, spread, and one day change the world for good.